Immigration in the 20th century. You will use the last page of your immigration packet to fill in most of the information in this slideshow. Here we go. So you should learn two things. First, how did immigration laws change in the 20th century? And then secondly, what factors caused these laws to change? Factors that impacted immigration policy throughout history. Do not worry about writing this down. General overview just to get you thinking about why immigration laws change. Take, for instance, the first and second industrial revolutions, primarily occurring in the 19th century. As the country industrializes, there is a need for cheap labor. If America has a need for labor, we are more likely to open up the door and let immigrants in, and we do. However, by the 1890s, the economy begins to change. The western frontier is considered closed, meaning there's not much western land left. The Depression of 1897 hits. That causes industrialization to slow and people to lose their jobs. This is going to cause us to start to restrict immigration. When we enter World War I in 1917, and when the first Red Scare begins in 1920, which is the fear of communism after the Bolshevik Revolution, America will restrict immigration even further. During the Great Depression, when no one has a job, it seems, and during World War II, when the nation is at war with 3 different countries, those factors will cause immigration to be restricted. And then during the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement, we're going to have kind of contradictory immigration policies. On one hand, we need immigrants for brain power, but on the other hand, we're fearful of communism and radical political ideas coming to America. And then after the September 11th terrorist attacks, we're going to see the impact that has on our immigration policy. So you do not have to write this one down either, but this is just a review of what we covered in class over the last 2 days. First, America's door was wide open to the old immigrants. Remember, who are they? They're coming from Northern and Western Europe. They have an easier time assimilating. Why do we have the door wide open to them? We have the need for cheap labor in an industrial economy, and at the time period they come, the West is pretty much unsettled. So there's wide availability. People can go west. Our economy can absorb these immigrants. However, America's door begins to close in 1882 when the first ever law is passed to restrict immigration. It's the Chinese Exclusion Act. The reason we passed this law, what was called yellow peril. There was a fear that there were too many Chinese workers, and because there were too many of them, that drove down wages for American workers. Too much supply, not enough demand. And then the door continued to close after the arrival of the new immigrants. Why did the door close on them? Cultural differences. So new immigrants could not assimilate as easily into a WASP culture. Remember, WASP is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and the new immigrants were very diverse, very much different cultures. And also, industrialization began to slow, too many people and not enough jobs. Okay, here's where you should start taking some notes. Let's look at some really important laws that are going to be in place for about 50 years. The National Origins Act and the quota laws, they set limits on the number of immigrants who could come over from specific countries. So a country like China, nobody. A country like Eastern Europe, maybe 3% of the people could come, of the population that was already here. Why were we limiting who could come? There was a fear of radical political ideas coming to America after the communist revolution in Russia. A lot of Eastern European countries live near Russia or were taken over by Russia, so there was fear that those immigrants liked those political ideas and they would infect America with them. There was also a fear of WASP culture, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture, being corrupted by the culturally different new immigrants. So there was a belief that there was too many of them and their cultures were not compatible, they would not assimilate easily, and they posed a threat to the English language and the Protestant faith, for instance. And there's a picture to give you a sense of what the quota laws and the National Origins Act did. It's kind of like a funnel. All these people want to come here, but we only let so many in. During the Great Depression, immigration slowed to a trickle. And also, America refused to take in a lot of people who were looking to get out of Europe, especially the Jews who were fleeing Hitler. They saw the writing on the wall. They kind of had a sense of what was coming. America doesn't take very many in. And the reason? Over 25% of Americans were unemployed. There simply were not enough jobs for the people who were already here. So they were not going to let additional people in. During World War II, Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants were put into internment camps. These were almost like prisons. And the reason this happened during the war, because of the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, certain immigrant groups were seen as a threat to national security because it was wartime. Now, the Italians and the Germans face some discriminatory measures, but the Japanese really bear the brunt of it. And many people argue it's because they're a different race of people. It's easy to spot someone who's Japanese, not so much an Italian or a German. They tended to blend in a little more easily. So the Japanese definitely faced some discrimination during World War II. The Cold War. Two things we're going to write down for the Cold War. There's another slide dealing with it. The McCarran-Walter Immigration Act. This was passed in 1952. It restricted anyone associated with communism or radical political ideas from coming to America. Why did we care about this? Because our new conflict was with the Soviet Union. Communism was the enemy. It was the complete opposite of our economy, the complete opposite of our political system, and it was seen as a threat to our national security, as this little picture down here shows you. The Immigration Act of 1965. This law finally abolishes the quota system of the 1920s. So from about 1920 till about 1965, immigration is very heavily restricted in the United States. However, what the Immigration Act of 1965 does is it says we are going to have an overall cap. So we let in a few hundred thousand per year. So it's not unlimited. The door's not wide open. It's about half open, to provide that metaphor. Why are we doing this? Because America is realizing, hey, there's a lot of discrimination in our society. The civil rights movement is going on. That causes America to realize we need to get rid of discrimination in our immigration laws as well as in our own day-to-day society. Here's the impact of the Immigration Act of 1965. By abolishing the quota system, by removing the bans that existed in the 1920s on specific countries, immigration fundamentally changes. Europeans stop emigrating or immigrating to America. What ends up happening, though, once these restrictions are lifted, is people from the third world, from developing countries, begin to come to America. You see, any country in red here is the source of immigration after 1965. The Americas, on the left, the continent of Africa, the Middle East, India, China, Japan, and other Asian countries. So, big theme here. America has become increasingly diverse. We have become a lot more colorful in the last 50 years because of our immigration policy. Once the Cold War ends, a new problem that emerges is illegal immigration. We have a cap on the number of immigrants, right? A few 100,000 people. But we're unable to stop it. Every year, there are people who come here in violation of the law. There's only so many people we let in. Those people still want to come here. They kind of cut in line and try to cross the border illegally. Why is this happening? There's a lack of economic opportunity in Latin American countries. And you can see on this graph where the source of it is. Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, those are the top countries where there is a lot of illegal immigration. And finally, September 11th and beyond. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks, America returns to a very restrictive policy. We haven't gone back to the 1920s. We're not as restrictive as the quota laws, but the door has closed even further. We have an increase in deportations. We've seen that over the last 10 to 15 years. Immigrants who are here illegally can be sent back to their country. We limit the number of visas we give out. A visa is a temporary pass to be in a country. We're very careful about how we give those out. And we also do greater screening, better background checks on immigrants, why they're here, how long they're here for, what their purpose is. And the reason we do these things, fear of another terrorist attack. The 9/11 hijackers, the people who carried out the attack, were here, most of them were here, on temporary visas. So we let them into the country. And so now they're careful not to do that again. So to just reflect and summarize our week-long look at immigration here, think about what is an appropriate immigration policy? How do we balance our national security and the fact that our economy has needs? We need workers. So how do we balance these two things with our image as the one nation that's open to the world? So remember the quote from the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. There's that image of America. Yet at the same time, America has also said stay out at different periods or different eras. So we balance these two forces. And another question to think about, should certain immigrants be given preferential treatment? Are all people equal? Should everyone have a fair chance to come to America? Or should we reserve opportunities to the people who are going to serve our interests, like the highly educated or the skilled, doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, inventors, etc.? So these are just some questions to chew on. So with that, good night and good luck.